Joyce and I had shared 12 years of marriage, a journey that began when we were just 10-year-old sweethearts. While I never felt drawn to college, I landed an entry-level position at Patterson Engineering as a draftsman straight out of high school. A year later, Joyce and I tied the knot, and soon after, our family expanded with the arrival of twin girls, Batty and Bridget. Those initial years were challenging, but with careful budgeting, we made ends meet. My career as a draftsman progressed, though finances remained tight. Despite the constraints, we saved diligently, eventually purchasing a modest home and acquiring 2 dependable cars. While not brand new, they were far from dilapidated. Joyce's dream was always to be a stay-at-home mom, and with our prudent savings, that dream became a reality. As for our health, we were both fortunate to be in good shape. Joyce had gained a bit of weight since our wedding, but it was hardly noticeable. Standing just over 5 feet tall, with her dark brown hair and bangs, she resembled a petite Mary Osmond. As for myself, my physique hadn't changed much since my days as a high school football player. Brian Miller, a recent transplant from Lancaster, joined Patterson Engineering as a surveyor about a year ago. Brian and I had crossed paths on the football field in our youth, forging an instant camaraderie upon his arrival. He, too, married his high school sweetheart, Stella, a spirited redhead. Instantly, Stella and Joyce hit it off, forming a fast friendship. Though Brian and Stella had yet to start a family of their own, they proved to be ideal babysitters for our girls. When Brian and I weren't at work, we found solace in each other's company, a welcome respite from the routine of home life. Meanwhile, Joyce and Stella had forged their own bond, indulging in shopping excursions, parties, and club meetings. While they reveled in their activities, Brian and I took charge of childcare duties, often passing the time in front of the TV. Stella had secured a job as a secretary at Russell Engineering, expanding her social circle beyond our small town. Yet my observations began to stir unease about 6 months ago. What was once a monthly PTA meeting had now become a weekly occurrence, and Stella, despite lacking children of her own, faithfully accompanied Joyce. The frequency of Tupperware and Magic Chef parties seemed to surge, though purchases were conspicuously absent. They even joined a book club, though the books themselves remained untouched. Weekend shopping trips stretched on for hours, yielding minimal purchases. Meanwhile, Joyce's lingerie collection expanded, though I found little opportunity to appreciate it. About an hour after tucking the girls into bed, Joyce returned from a basket party. She promptly showered upon her arrival, which struck me as peculiar. While she was freshening up, I decided to sneak a peek in the hamper, where I discovered a pair of black lace underwear. Who wears black lace underwear to a basket party? Until tonight, I had never felt the need to delve into my wife's purse or wallet. Yet tonight was different, and my focus zeroed in on her cell phone. It seemed she was rather confident that I wouldn't snoop, as she hadn't bothered to delete any recent calls. Most were to Stella, but a significant number were to individuals identified only by initials, KC, KH, and KO. Though their identities eluded me, I quickly surmised that C stood for cell, H for home, and EW likely for work. A glance at her address book revealed a similar organization for Stella's contacts: Stella C, Stella H, and Stella W. I couldn't help but marvel at how meticulously Joyce had organized her phone. The pieces began to fall into place as I noticed that Stella's work number had an extension, and the number for KW matched Stella's, but with a different extension. It became apparent that Joyce had been in frequent contact with someone from Stella's workplace, and it wasn't difficult to deduce that Stella had facilitated the connection. With Russell Engineering closed for the night, I seized Joyce's phone and dialed the catalog number. "Hello, you have reached the desk of Kevin Scott. I am not at my desk right now, but if you leave your name and number, I will get back to you as soon as I can," came the automated response. I ended the call after the beep, feeling a wave of unease. It all seemed too easy. "Jason, are you coming to bed?" Joyce's voice interrupted from the doorway. "I'm just finishing up this book. I'll be up shortly," I replied, feigning nonchalance. In truth, I had every intention of spending the night on the couch. Restlessness plagued me as I tossed and turned. Thoughts circled back relentlessly, questioning what I could have done differently. But I refused to succumb to guilt for something that wasn't my doing. The clock seemed frozen, each passing minute a reminder of my turmoil. Yet, amidst the turmoil, one thing remained clear. I wouldn't allow myself to shoulder unwarranted blame for whatever had transpired or was yet to come. I woke up to the familiar sounds of my daughters preparing their breakfast, Joyce's voice gently encouraging them to take responsibility for themselves. It was a routine that seemed to be working well. As I stretched and rubbed my eyes, Joyce entered the room, reminding me of the time. "You better hurry, Jason, or you'll be late for work," she said. "No problem. I won't be going in today," I replied, surprising even myself with the decisiveness of my statement. "Why? You never miss work," Joyce responded, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Too many personal issues," I muttered, heading towards the bathroom in need of a shower. Joyce's puzzled expression lingered as I left the room. When I returned, the girls had already left for school. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down across from Joyce. Reluctantly, she met my gaze, sensing that something was amiss. "Tell me about your affair," I blurted out, bypassing any preamble. I knew she wouldn't easily divulge the truth, but I couldn't bring myself to dance around the issue. Joyce's eyes widened in disbelief. "Get serious, Jason. Is this why you've been acting so strangely? Do you honestly believe I'm having an affair?" "Yes, so tell me," I insisted firmly, refusing to back down. "We've been married for 12 years, Jason. Why would you even think such a thing?" She countered, a mixture of hurt and frustration evident in her tone. "Joyce, I have things to attend to today, and I'm not going to waste time playing games. Tell me about your affair," I pressed, my patience wearing thin. Exasperated, Joyce leaned towards me. "Jason, it's all in your head. There is no affair." "Well, I would thank you for your honesty, but I can't, can I?" I retorted, feeling a surge of bitterness. She reclined in her chair, sipping her coffee with an air of control. "Can we move past this now? What else do you want to know?" "Why do you attend PTA meetings every week when the secretary says they're only monthly, and you haven't been to any in 6 months?" I asked pointedly, my resolve unyielding. I'm not sure what you're talking about," Joyce faltered, her confidence wavering. "Why do you and Stella attend non-existent PTA meetings every Tuesday? What's the point of lying about it?" I confronted Joyce, my frustration bubbling beneath the surface. After a moment of hesitation, Joyce offered an explanation. "I'm truly sorry, Jason. Tuesday is ladies' night at Rosie's Cantina, and Stella and I go for the 2-for-1 margaritas. We didn't want you and Brian to think we were up to something, so we kept it quiet. It was a mistake, and I apologize. We'll be honest with you from now on." "Nice try, Joyce. I'll be checking that out. You might have Stella to back you up, but what about the folks at Rosie's?" I challenged, refusing to accept her half-hearted excuse. "Jason, you're blowing this out of proportion," she insisted. "Why do you shower before and after those Tupperware parties?" I pressed on, my frustration mounting. "It's because a lot of the women smoke at those gatherings. I want to get rid of the smell when I get home. It's no big deal," she countered dismissively. "Why do you wear fancy underwear to these parties? You never dress up like that for me unless it's a special occasion. But every time you're with those housewives, you're in your finest. Why?" I demanded, my patience wearing thin. "I don't have a good answer for that. Sometimes I just want to feel dressed up when I go out," she admitted sheepishly. Her lies and denials pushed me over the edge. With a surge of anger, I hurled my half-filled coffee cup across the room, the impact shattering the front of the microwave. The sound of breaking glass jolted Joyce, her expression shifting to one of shock as she realized the depth of my frustration. Leaning forward, I locked eyes with her and raised my voice. "Who is Kevin Scott?" She recoiled, retreating to the sink, her fear palpable. "Just a friend," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Did you sleep with him?" I demanded, my anger boiling over. Yes, I did," she confessed, her words laced with desperation. "Stop it, Jason. Please stop it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Just stop it, please." She broke down into sobs, and I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, trying to steady my nerves. As I prepared to sit down, Joyce's phone rang. Her eyes darted between me and the phone, and I decided to answer the call on speaker. "Good morning, sugar. I just arrived at work and noticed you tried calling my office number last night. Did you forget something at home?" I greeted Joyce using the affectionate nickname. There was a noticeable shift in Joyce's demeanor, a hint of mortification evident in her silence. "Joyce, are you there? Is everything all right?" I prompted, urging her to respond. Her gaze met mine, a look of sheer panic crossing her face. I signaled for her to speak up, my heart pounding in my chest. "Kevin. Kevin," she stuttered, her voice trembling. "Kevin, my husband, is here. He knows about us. He has the phone on speaker." The line remained silent, and I felt compelled to release him from the awkward situation. "Kevin, old pal, I've got some errands to run this morning, but I'll swing by this afternoon. Maybe you should keep 911 on speed dial." With that, I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Joyce stood frozen by the sink, her bathrobe draped around her trembling form. "I have to leave now, but I have one last question. Who's the guy Stella's seeing?" I demanded, my voice cutting through the tense atmosphere. "Jason, please, don't make me," Joyce began, but before she could finish, the second cup soared across the room, shattering against the tile wall behind her. She recoiled in shock, her words tumbling out in a frantic rush. Charles Bailey. "I'll be back this afternoon. Have your things packed by then. My mother will look after the girls until we sort things out. Anything you can't fit in your car, I'll take care of. Let my mother know where you'll be, and don't bother calling me," I instructed, my tone cold and final. With that, I left without another word, leaving Joyce standing motionless in the aftermath of our shattered life together. Feeling adrift, I decided to head to the office and seek solace in Brian's company. He had always been a friend, and I believed he deserved to know the truth. As I pieced together the tangled web of betrayal in my mind, it seemed clear. Stella had met Charles at work, befriended him, and Kevin was likely a companion of Charles in need of a date. It might have been oversimplified, but it was a start. Brian wasn't in the office. He was out at a site setting stakes or something of the sort. I dialed his cell, preparing to drop the bombshell. "Brian, hate to bother you, but I've got some bad news." "Is someone hurt?" Brian's concern was evident in his voice. "Not yet, but they're headed for trouble," I replied grimly. "What the hell are you talking about, Jason?" Brian's confusion was palpable. "Joyce and Stella have been sneaking around with a couple of guys. All those supposed meetings and Tupperware parties. They've been rendezvousing with their new boyfriends." "Are you sure? That sounds like bullshit to me," Brian responded skeptically. "Ask Stella about a guy named Charles Bailey. He works at Russell with her. I reckon she introduced Joyce to another fella from there too." "Shit, really? Damn it, Jason. I know Charles Bailey. We were in the same graduating class." "How about a guy named Kevin Scott?" I pressed, seeking confirmation. "Yeah, him too. Tall, skinny fella," Brian confirmed, his tone growing more serious. "Listen, Joyce will likely tip off Stella as soon as she can. I got a load of crap from Joyce this morning before I got the truth out of her. I'm guessing you'll get the same runaround from Stella," I warned. Brian hung up, and I made a beeline for personnel to request some time off. I wasn't in the mood to work. It took just 10 minutes to delegate my ongoing tasks to another draftsman. As I settled into my newfound freedom, Joyce's cell rang. Caller ID revealed it was Stella. "Joyce, what's going on?" "I just got a call from Brian. He's on his way to the office. Somebody's been talking." Stella's voice sounded urgent. I remained silent, enjoying the moment. "Joyce, are you there?" "This isn't the time for games," Stella persisted. "Hi, Stella. It's Jason. Borrowed Joyce's phone. Mine's dead." "What's Brian been told?" I couldn't resist a bit of mischief. "I'm sorry, Jason. Thought I was reaching Joyce. I'll try her at home," Stella apologized. "Don't bother her right now. She's busy packing her things. Moving back in with her parents for a while," I informed her matter-of-factly. There was a stunned silence on the other end, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought of Stella's reaction. "I think it's more urgent for you to let Charles know Brian's on his way over. He could use a head start, I suggested. Oh God, no, this can't be happening. No. No. Stella's panicked voice filled the line before she abruptly hung up on me. The nerve of that woman. Canceling our sole credit card was a straightforward task. Thankfully, adjusting the PIN number for our ATM/debit card was a quick 5-minute job. As for our checking account, I was at a loss for what to do, so I chose to set it aside for the time being. After all, we still relied on it for essential payments like utilities and bills. I just hoped Joyce hadn't taken any checks with her. My phone rang again. This time it was Brian. He recounted how he pursued Charles Bailey out of the Russell building and detained him in the parking lot. Now Charles was in jail and needed his brother in Lancaster to post bail. I made the call, feeling a sense of helplessness, then decided to grab lunch at Taco Bell. Afterward, I paid a visit to my mom and dad, filling them in on the situation. Mom readily agreed to look after the girls for a while, with plans for her to stay with us during the week and the twins to stay with them on weekends. With that arranged, it was time to confront Kevin Scott. The guys in the drafting department at Russell eagerly shared details of Brian's morning encounter. From their vantage point overlooking the parking lot, they witnessed the entire altercation. Brian intercepted Charles before he reached his BMW, throwing him onto the hood of a nearby car and assaulting him. Despite the security guard's intervention, Brian's rage was unrelenting until they subdued him with a taser. Charles was whisked away by EMTs, while Brian was taken into police custody. I was directed to Kevin Scott's cubicle, only to find it empty. It appeared Kevin had abruptly resigned that morning. We stopped by Stella's desk, but she wasn't there. However, it seemed evident that she was still employed. Within 10 minutes, I managed to obtain Kevin's home address, prompting me to make my way to the parking lot. Arriving at his small ranch house, I noticed a white Lexus parked in the driveway, its trunk and back doors wide open. Just as I approached, Kevin emerged from the house carrying a bundle of clothing. Startled by my presence, he hastily retreated back inside. I chuckled at his reaction, recognizing that I wasn't the intimidating type like Brian. The house appeared to be rented and fully furnished, explaining the absence of a truck. In another 10 minutes, Kevin would likely have been packed up and ready to leave town. Though I was eager to have a conversation with him, I wasn't keen on chasing him down. Instead, I explored the premises, stumbling upon a few pleasant surprises. I spotted his cell phone on a desk in the living room, alongside a folder containing his passport and personal papers. On the dining room table sat a sleek laptop computer. Satisfied with my discoveries, I gathered them up and made my exit. Resisting the urge to vandalize his car, I admired its beauty. While I recognized that taking items from the house could be considered theft, I reasoned that Kevin had left the door open, making them fair game for anyone. Unable to completely restrain myself, I let the air out of one of his tires as a subtle message. He would have to unload the trunk to access the spare, all while keeping an eye out for me. I'd deal with him later. He got the message. I made a quick stop by the jail to see Brian, but he was deep in legal discussions with his brother, so I just waved and smiled, reassured that he had things under control. Mom had already arrived at the house and had supper started. After exchanging some conversation, I took the items I'd retrieved from Kevin's place into the den where I kept my computer and other belongings. However, before I could delve into them, Batty and Bridget returned home from school. Sensing it was best to address the situation before they asked, I didn't get the chance. "Hi, Dad. What's Nana doing here?" Where is Mom? Batty beat me to the punch. "Your mom and I have decided to take a little break from each other. She'll be staying at her parents' place for a while," I informed them. Bridget started grinning while Batty rolled her eyes and groaned. "I win. Hey, I win." "I told you so," Bridget boasted triumphantly while her sister scowled. "What's going on? What's so funny?" I inquired, confused. Bridget eagerly volunteered to explain. "Batty and I had a bet. I said that Mom was cheating on you, and she said it would never happen. Looks like I won." "I never mentioned anything about your mother cheating," I protested. "We're not stupid, Dad, and don't treat us like children. We know what's going on. I just didn't want to admit it. Bridget's right. Mom's cheating on you, Batty declared matter-of-factly. How did you find out? I just discovered this, I admitted, taken aback. You're a little slow, Dad, and a little too trusting, Bridget remarked, slipping her arm around my shoulder in an attempt to comfort me, an unusual role reversal. One Saturday when Mom and Stella said they were going shopping at King of Prussia, Mom wouldn't let Bridget and me come along. She said it was a grown-up shopping day and promised to make it up to us later. But when we got to school on Monday, a couple of kids claimed they saw her with a guy at Noble's Grove. We call them liars, but one of the girls had a cell phone picture. It seemed pretty clear-cut. I figured there must be an explanation, but Bridget insisted she was cheating, Batty recounted solemnly. Why didn't you say something to me? I questioned, but they simply shrugged. A couple of weeks later, Tiffany Morris's parents spotted Stella, Mom, and two guys at TGI Fridays in Allentown. They informed Tiffany about it when they got home. I sat there dumbfounded. Thank goodness Mom called us for supper, providing a welcome distraction. We avoided discussing the issue during dinner, and I excused myself before dessert arrived. Luckily, the twins decided to drop the subject for the rest of the night, much to my relief. Just as I started to sift through Kevin's laptop, his cell phone rang with a text message. Dear Kevin, sorry for the problems. Love, Joyce. The message came from Stella's cell phone, which meant that Stella and Joyce were together. I couldn't resist the temptation and replied. Thanks a lot. Kaysen. Now she knew I had Kevin's cell phone. Over the next couple of hours, I delved into the files and folders on Kevin's computer. While there were no emails exchanged between Joyce and Kevin, I stumbled upon some correspondence between Kevin and his old friends in Lancaster that piqued my interest. What I read left me astonished and unsettled. Despite spending almost our entire lives together, it seemed I never truly knew Joyce. She appeared to have formed a stronger bond with Kevin in less than a year than she had with me in almost 20. As I replaced the printer cartridge, I couldn't help but notice tears welling up in my eyes, a rarity for me. Her betrayal stung, and my tears only seemed to exacerbate the pain. I printed out several emails and a dozen pictures, though I would have printed more photos if I hadn't run out of expensive paper. Surprisingly, there were no explicit or suggestive images among them. They were all suitable for general viewing. Just as I was engrossed in this task, Batty interrupted, asking if she could call her mother. Despite my mixed emotions, I couldn't bring myself to refuse her request. Meanwhile, my mother, who was with the twins during their conversation with Joyce, inadvertently overheard everything. The girls didn't hold back and placed the blame squarely on Joyce's shoulders. The conversation didn't last long, lasting less than 5 minutes. The emails proved to be particularly revealing. Kevin had secured a job as an engineer for an alternative power project in Spain, with a starting date just 6 weeks away. Strangely, he hadn't given notice at Russell, and I suspected only Stella was aware of his impending departure. He seemed well prepared for the trip, except for one detail, his passport, which I happened to have. While he could likely obtain a replacement, time was of the essence if he intended to make his start date. I doubted he would report me to the police for taking it, especially since he hadn't made any flight reservations yet. One of the emails to a close friend shed light on Joyce's intentions. She was planning to file for divorce after joining Kevin in Spain. Recognizing that I wouldn't consent to the girls leaving the country, she intended to have me deemed an unfit father. The letter didn't provide many specifics on her plan, but it hinted at measures severe enough to strip me of visitation and custody rights. It was a cruel revelation, made even more bitter by the fact that Kevin had written the letter, rendering it hearsay. I wished for something directly from Joyce outlining her intentions, but I had to make do with what I had. I printed several copies of the letter for safekeeping. Mom had dozed off watching Leno, so I escorted her upstairs to our bedroom. The girls were already in bed, and I drifted off on the couch surrounded by empty beer bottles. The aroma of fresh coffee and bacon roused me from sleep. Mom always put together a hearty breakfast. By the time I made it to the table, the girls were finishing their cereal. Amidst some playful banter, I broached the serious topic before they headed off to catch the bus. Girls, I'm afraid your mother may try to separate us. She's planning to label me unfit so she can have you all to herself. I'm okay with shared custody if that's what you want, but I won't give up my right to see you. I want you to be aware of what's going on. Be cautious and don't believe any lies. Dad, we're smarter than you think. Don't worry. We love Mom, but we won't let her harm you or us. Bridget grinned, and Batty gave me a reassuring thumbs up as they left. Mom refilled my cup and sat down with her own. Relax, Jason. Everyone's on your side. After showering and shaving, I dressed slightly more formally than usual. It felt peculiar leaving the house with 3 cell phones, but I made a mental note to get a charger for Kevin's phone just in case. Better to be prepared, even if it seemed unnecessary. I checked in at the Family Services office and waited for my name to be called. When I finally got called, I was surprised to see someone familiar, Jenny Martinez. It had been over a decade since I last saw her. Jason Turner, it's been ages. What have you been up to? Jenny greeted me warmly. Jenny was memorable from her high school days as one of the goth girls. They formed their own clique and stuck together, often being ostracized by others, particularly the jocks like myself. I remembered her with her pink streaked hair, black lipstick, and dark eye makeup. Despite her appearance then, she looked quite different now, more conventional. The funny thing about the goths was the mystery surrounding them. People speculated about their involvement in drugs, perversion, or even witchcraft. Of course, in hindsight, it was likely none of those things. Jenny, I assumed, was still unmarried, judging by the nameplate on her desk reading J. Martinez. 12 years ago, that made sense, but today she seemed. Jason, what brings you to me? Her question interrupted my train of thought. I found myself stumbling over my words. You look great, Jenny. She chuckled at my awkwardness, compared to how I used to look. Now, embarrassment tinged my cheeks, I suppose, but I didn't mean to imply anything. Relax, Jason. It took me halfway through college to realize I could face the world as myself, without any pretense. I've been what you'd call normal for almost 10 years. I'm more comfortable with normal now, but darn it, that sounds patronizing. I seem to have a knack for putting my foot in my mouth. Please excuse me. Forget it. Now, why are you here? Before we dive in, I need to ask, do you have any files or reports on me? Anything at all? Her fingers danced across the keys like a pianist. Nothing here, Jason. You married Joyce Watson, correct? Yes. Nothing under her name either. It seems like you two are just raising your kids without any issues. You do have kids, right? Yeah, we have 12-year-old twin girls, Batty and Bridget. All right, now can we discuss the issue that brought you here? Jenny, this might sound far-fetched, and I know it's hard to believe, but my wife is planning on leaving me and taking the girls with her. It's not uncommon, Jason. We see this scenario quite often. Doesn't she need a reason to take such a step? Typically, when a mother approaches us, she comes armed with documentation or evidence to support her claims. You just checked, and there's nothing in our records now. Correct? That's correct, Jason, but how can I be certain you're not setting me up? Perhaps she's gathering medical or police reports before bringing them to our attention. Just because our system doesn't show anything doesn't rule out the possibility. So, what you're suggesting is that I can't win. No, that's not what I'm saying. Why do you think she's contemplating such actions? I hadn't intended to reveal the email Kevin had sent, but now I felt compelled. I had to question why I'd made copies if I had no intention of sharing them. I slid one across the desk to Jenny. Where did you obtain this? I retrieved it from a computer I accessed illegally. I understand it may not hold up in court, but it serves as some form of evidence regarding the situation. The term conspiracy comes to mind, though I'm unsure of its legal implications. I reached out to you or someone in this office because I'm unsure how to protect myself and my daughters in this situation, and I can't afford legal representation. Jenny Martinez eased back into her chair, a moment of calm amidst the swirling uncertainties. I observed her closely, not daring to break the silence. With a gentle sway, she leaned in my direction. Can you return tomorrow morning? Yes. Good. I'll expect you then. Mind if I hold on to this email copy? I nodded affirmatively, turning to exit the room. It's been nice catching up, Jason. I offered a smile in return, noting the transformation in Jenny's demeanor. The goth girl faded from memory as I glimpsed this new version of her. With no legal connections to rely on, I resorted to the yellow pages to find representation. Aware of Jenny's intentions for divorce, I opted for preemptive action. Uncertain about our financial future, I secured a lawyer and settled the fees upfront in cash, emphasizing speed and simplicity. The house, its value dwindling below the mortgage, was hers if she desired. My priority? Joint custody of the twins, or full custody if feasible, with child support but no alimony. Midway through my lunch break, Brian called in need of shelter, and I readily extended an offer. We rendezvoused at Taco Bell for a humble meal, where Brian's grin greeted me upon arrival. I can see the happiness doesn't quite match the situation. What's going on? A friend of mine from Community General Hospital filled me in on Charles. Stella went to see him there, not knowing she was walking into a trap. Charles's wife arrived with their kids, causing a scene that got Stella escorted out by security. I swung by Russell to talk to her, but she'd already quit. She's probably home now, but I'm not certain. Why wasn't his wife up here with him? No idea. And why wasn't he going home to his family on weekends? Honestly, I couldn't care less. Brian took a week off to sort things out. With my mom also staying at the house, we'd need to figure out sleeping arrangements. Brian planned to grab some essentials from his place in case Stella wasn't around. He decided against confronting her. I was on my way to see my insurance agent when the phone rang again. Jason, it's Clifford Watson. Can you come over? Joyce is falling apart and her mother's not helping. We'll be there. Just us three and Joyce's sister, Caroline. Not sure what we'll accomplish, but I'll be there in 20. It was a solemn gathering. I brought my documents but declined coffee. Who wants to start? Jason, Joyce thinks you're overreacting. She says you were furious and pressured her into saying things she didn't mean to calm you down. She insists she did nothing wrong and you have no right to kick her out. It was evident that my wife had sugarcoated the truth when recounting the events to her parents. While I could empathize with her reluctance to admit her infidelity, I couldn't help but resent her shifting the blame onto me. What would you like me to do, Clifford? Prove she's lying or confess to my own mistake? I just want some clarity, some facts to understand the situation better, Clifford replied. What did she say about her friend? I asked. She insists he was just a friend from work, that you misinterpreted the situation. Clifford, she had over 80 phone calls with this friend in the past month. How many times did she call you or her mother? They both turned to Joyce, who avoided their gaze. Does that sound like an occasional drinking buddy to you? Silence filled the room as I pulled out Kevin's cell phone. Caroline, can you read text messages? Here's one sent to her friend after I kicked her out. Why don't you share it with everyone? Dear Kevin, sorry for the trouble. Love, Joyce. Caroline read aloud before returning the phone to me. Does that sound like a casual friend? I questioned. Joyce buried her face in her hands while Clifford shook his head slowly. A couple of weeks back, Joyce and Stella claimed they were going shopping at the King of Prussia Mall. The twins begged to join, but their mother refused. Here are some photos from that outing. I passed 6 photos to Clifford, who examined them before passing them to Monica and Caroline. This doesn't look like King of Prussia. It's Noble's Grove. Damn it, Joyce, what's going on? I exclaimed. Monica, who had been silent until then, spoke up. Joyce, in every picture, you're clinging onto this man's arm like your life depends on it. That's not what friends do. It's clear this Kevin guy is more than just a friend. What were you trying to pull? Tears streamed down Joyce's face, her hopes dashed by the unexpected revelation of the photos. I have a few more from different occasions. 2 are from Olive Garden and 1 from Red Lobster. Thankfully, my dear wife is fully clothed in all of them, I added. I think we've seen enough, Jason. I apologize for dragging you into this, Clifford said, his disappointment evident. As I rose to leave, Joyce fled the room, sobbing uncontrollably. Clifford accompanied me to the door. "Jason, I'm sorry we can't undo what's happened, but I assure you it won't be ignored," he said, shaking my hand before I departed. Back home, Mom and Brian had set up a rollaway bed in the den where I kept the computer. Brian had brought over a stack of his clothes from his house, as Stella wasn't there. The most intriguing thing awaited me in the mail, addressed to Joyce, an official envelope from the passport department. I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't resist opening it. Inside was a family passport with a photo of Joyce and the girls. I recalled them mentioning getting a picture taken, but I never imagined it was for this purpose. Naturally, there was no passport for me in the envelope. I immediately phoned Clifford and instructed him to inform Joyce about her passport's arrival. If she wanted it, she could send Kevin to retrieve it from the house. I'd only hand it over to him. Typically, I'd have been at work when the mail came, none the wiser about her receiving it. Clifford mentioned they'd asked Joyce to find alternative accommodation. They had no clue where she'd go. It seemed they were rather annoyed with their daughter. He assured me he'd pass on the message about the passport. Dinner conversation revolved mostly around the girls. "A lady from Family Services visited us at school today," Batty said, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. "Care to elaborate? Did she speak to you both together or separately?" I inquired. "Both of us at once. Her name was Jenny. She mentioned you went to high school together," Bridget chimed in. "We did attend the same high school, but we weren't together," I clarified, earning a scowl from Bridget for my sarcasm. "What did she want to discuss?" I asked. "You. That's all she talked about." "Batty and I both thought she liked you," Bridget replied. "She spoke to us for over an hour. We missed gym and part of geography," Batty added, both girls talking at once, making it challenging to keep up. Dinner was interrupted by a call from Caroline, seeking a conversation. We met at McDonald's, settling into a corner table with steaming cups of coffee. Joyce asked me to try to explain what's going on. She couldn't do it herself, Caroline began. "I might sound foolish, but if I have questions, how will you answer them?" I asked. "I don't know if I can. I'll just talk, and you listen. I'm sure I'll mess up some of it. It sounded like gibberish when she told me," Caroline replied. "You're setting me up to hear excuses and justifications, not answers," I remarked. "I always knew you were sharp, Jason," Caroline said with a smile. "Let's get it over with." "I have other things to do," I said, eager to move forward. First, she pins it all on Stella. Stella started cheating on Brian, making it seem thrilling and romantic. Joyce claimed she'd never experienced excitement and romance, just her love and reliability. When Kevin Scott joined Russell, Stella convinced Joyce to join them for drinks and meals out. During these outings, Stella and Charles would often slip away for intimacy, leaving Joyce and Kevin alone. Eventually, Joyce and Kevin started fooling around too, leading to a full-blown affair. Once it began, she couldn't or didn't want to stop it. Kevin dazzled her with tales of his adventures and future plans. She wanted to be part of it all. When he asked her to go to Spain, she eagerly agreed. The main issue wasn't leaving you, but leaving the girls. She knew you'd never allow them to go overseas, so she planned to make you appear like a bad father. Now she realizes it was a mistake. After speaking to the girls, she saw they were closer to you than her. She's willing to forego attempting to take the twins if you agree to a divorce with no strings attached. That's it. Pretty much, yep. Okay. Tell her to go ahead and file the papers. I won't contest it if it's as you described. Oh, Jason. One more thing. Joyce wants her passport. Do you have it? Everything started to make sense. I didn't know her exact plan, but I suspected she hadn't given up on taking the girls. They'd resist fiercely unless she had a plan. The family passport was crucial. Caroline, my coffee's cold. I'm heading home for a hot shower. Don't call me again. Jason, what's wrong? What did I do to upset you? You damn well know what you did. Do you both think I'm that foolish? Go back to your sister and tell her she'll never get her hands on my daughters. Since you chose to assist her, I'll have to ask you never to speak to my girls again. Caroline was on her cell as I left McDonald's. I could only guess whom she was calling. I reached the Family Services office before it opened. Couldn't stay away from me, could you? Jenny greeted me, entering with a bright smile and a Starbucks cup in hand. She motioned for me to sit and apologized for not bringing an extra coffee. I suppose you know I spoke to your daughters yesterday, she asked. I nodded, feeling somewhat tongue-tied and out of my element. It seemed I always had difficulty conversing with her, just as I did the last time we talked. Spending my life with Joyce left me lacking in social skills with other women, and it seemed I was paying for it now. Is everything all right, Jason? Jenny inquired. Other than everything, no, I replied, struggling to articulate my thoughts. I'm sorry, Jenny. I think I better go. My head's not into all of this morning. I'll call you later, I said, deciding to leave the office. Before you leave, I want you to know that I'm arranging a restraining order against your wife. I can't prevent her from seeing the girls, but I can stop her from taking them out of state or restricting your access to them. It'll be served to her by noon, Jenny informed me. Despite feeling relieved, I left the office. I headed to the nearest Starbucks, craving the comforting aroma of coffee. Everything seemed under control until today. Now, I felt overwhelmed and disheartened. After driving aimlessly for a while, I headed home. Brian informed me that Stella had returned to her parents' house near Ephrata, so he was moving back into his own place temporarily. He spent the morning dealing with the bank, insurance company, and lawyer's office, hoping to secure some compensation from Russell. Unfortunately, his lawyer warned it would be a tough battle without a company policy against fraternization. Brian swung by the hospital and learned that Charles was being discharged. As Charles's wife handled the paperwork, she spotted Brian and approached him. She carefully explained that she was attempting to persuade Charles to drop the charges against Brian. Brian was taken aback when she thanked him for his assistance. It seemed she had been trying to help Charles straighten out for years, to no avail. After Brian left, I found solace on the front porch, nursing a beer. Mom brought out a meatloaf sandwich and joined me, silently offering her support. We both had a beer, and she mentioned Dad would be over for dinner and staying the night. When Jenny Martinez arrived, Mom retreated into the house. Jenny declined the cold beer I offered and settled beside me. After a moment's silence, she spoke. I served the papers on Joyce about an hour ago. She was furious. She's staying with her sister, by the way. I finished my beer. I guess that's something, but why do I feel so awful? In cases like this, there's no real silver lining, Jason, just varying degrees of hardship, Jenny replied. I hesitated, then retrieved another beer from the cooler, only to reconsider and put it back. Could you visit the girls and explain everything? I asked. I get along with them, but no matter how carefully I phrase it, it might come off as an attack on their mother. I don't want to alienate them. How about 7 tonight? Jenny suggested. I nodded as she headed back to her car. Halfway there, she glanced back, a promising sign that made me smile. She returned the gesture before driving off. That evening, Jenny visited and spent considerable time with Batty and Bridget. Meanwhile, Brian and I busied ourselves clearing out his house of anything belonging to Stella or reminiscent of her. Jenny began visiting the house several times a week, gradually spending as much time with my mom as with the girls. I noticed she was purposefully ignoring me. I was okay with that, but it piqued my curiosity. One evening, after putting the girls to bed, she sat beside me. Feeling the need to break the silence, I was about to speak when she beat me to it. "Do you have any wine?" she asked. Sort of, I replied, my conversational skills still lacking finesse. "What does that mean?" she inquired. "I don't have anything with a cork, just wine with screw tops," I admitted. She chuckled. "That'll do. Get me something red, will you?" and bring the bottle. The bottle was more like a jug, but she didn't seem to mind. I poured, and we sipped. Summoning my courage, I finally broached the topic. "I suppose the girls benefit a lot from your visits. How long do you think you'll need to keep seeing them?" I asked. "Oh, the twins are fine. They don't need me. I come here to see you," she confessed. "I don't understand. You hardly talk to me when you're here," I remarked. "I thought that's what you wanted," she responded. "Not really. I was just worried you had rules against fraternizing with clients," I admitted. Her laughter eased the tension between us. "I'm surprised you haven't asked to see my tattoos," she teased. "What tattoos?" I asked, playing along. It was clear she was trying to initiate a lighthearted conversation to relax me, and I appreciated it. "I have 4 of them from high school. 3 are easy to find, but one's a bit more hidden," she explained. "Are you going to show them to me, or do I need to search?" I joked. "It's more fun if you look, but I might need a bit more wine for that," she teased back. We both laughed as I filled her glass to the brim. The thrill of the hunt intensified as we tiptoed around, ensuring not to disturb the sleeping girls. Jenny's 4th tattoo was indeed in a very intimate spot, and I found myself admiring it for a while before she gently pushed me away. She left before the twins woke up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they might have been aware of what transpired. I instructed my lawyer from the telephone book to finalize the divorce papers and have them served. Joyce would have to accept my terms or handle it herself. She was still residing with Caroline when the papers arrived. There was no response, not even a phone call. Several more weeks passed, and my relationship with my dad deteriorated. Mom spent more time at his place than at mine. Fortunately, school was ending for the year, so the girls moved in with her for the summer. By summer's end, we moved Dad into an assisted living facility. Brian and I helped Mom prepare the family house for sale, and she moved back in with me. Throughout the summer, Jenny continued visiting the girls at Mom's place, spending several nights a week with me. They enjoyed outings together, and I was grateful for the attention Bridget and Batty received. I no longer felt jealous of their bond, and I suspected they were aware of the connection between Jenny and me. Joyce called the girls about once a week, but the conversations were brief and strained, according to Mom. Most of the time, the twins didn't even mention her calls to me. Brian's divorce from Stella was settled, but I remained uncertain about the status of mine. Meanwhile, Brian expressed his desire to establish his own surveying business and proposed that I join him. However, I lacked the funds to invest until my mom stepped in. With their finances depleted, she suggested using the money allocated for Dad's Medicare expenses for the business, viewing it as an investment in our future. 3 months later, Brian and I launched our own surveying enterprise, benefiting from my drafting skills, which smoothly transitioned into plot drawing. About a week into the new school semester, the twins received an unexpected visit from their mother. Anticipating a meeting with their counselor Jenny, they were disappointed to find Joyce instead. Despite their efforts to be courteous, the encounter didn't go smoothly. Joyce expressed her love for them, apologized for the circumstances, and promised to keep in touch by sending postcards from her trip to Spain, calling them on their birthdays, and sending extravagant Christmas gifts. The girls recounted her tearful departure. Joyce never directly informed me of her departure, but her parents visited the following week. They apologized for Joyce's actions without defending or justifying them. As Bridget and Batty were their only grandchildren, they expressed their desire to maintain a relationship with them, a request I readily accepted. They mentioned that Caroline was too embarrassed to visit, torn between her loyalty to her sister and her parents. 2 months later, my divorce was finalized. Jenny and I celebrated at Red Lobster, enjoying a rare evening out without the girls. They seemed content with the arrangement and greeted me excitedly upon my return the next morning. Though they didn't say much, their grins spoke volumes, indicating their happiness. A year later, our business was thriving, but sadly, my father passed away. Mom mentioned her desire to relocate to Florida to be with her sister, yet she was hesitant to leave the girls. To my surprise, the twins insisted that Grandma should go, explaining that Jenny could step in, despite her culinary skills not matching up to Mom's. They also declared they were old enough for separate rooms, a clear and sensible plan. The girls received birthday cards from their mother, but no phone call. Joyce flooded them with postcards featuring Spanish windmills, a detail I couldn't quite grasp the significance of. For Christmas, she sent 2 intricately embroidered dresses, though she hadn't accounted for the growth spurt typical of girls entering their teenage years. Yet neither of them seemed disappointed by the ill-fitting garments. Our business flourished, with Russell Engineering emerging as our primary client. Brian was pleased to hear that Charles had taken up a teaching position in electronics at the Lebanon County Vocational School, a notable step down from his previous role. Charles was no longer married, while Stella had remarried and relocated to California. Kevin Scott's tenure at his new job didn't even last 6 months, and his current whereabouts in the States remained a mystery. Brian, feeling I had been too lenient with Kevin, reached out to their high school alumni association in hopes of uncovering more information. Despite Kevin's disappearance, the girls continued to receive postcards adorned with windmills. However, these cards lacked any specific details, containing only generic sentiments. Clifford informed me that Joyce had contacted the girls multiple times, now working for a travel agency in Barcelona. Yet, she never mentioned Kevin or provided any insight into their relationship's fate. Jenny and I decided on a quiet marriage trip to Maryland, and within a year, she was expecting. Bridget and Batty were thrilled at the prospect of having a little goth sister, a private joke they shared with their new mom, excluding me from the loop. As for the Spanish windmills, their significance remained elusive to me. The second story. It was just our 23rd anniversary, but I had hoped it would be special. Unfortunately, a last-minute business conference threw a wrench in the works. I packed for the 3 days in Baltimore and grabbed a quick bite before leaving. Michelle, I promise I'll make it up to you. Roberts insisted I attend this seminar. I looked over the agenda and didn't see anything particularly important, but he's the boss. Don't worry about it, Ryan. I'll get even when we go to Europe for the 25th. We can go somewhere nice this weekend when you get back. Michelle and I had been married since college, and we have 2 daughters, Haley and Ashley, who are both in college. I had been with Beeman's International for about 10 years and was doing well. I put in a lot of hours and traveled quite a bit. Michelle didn't seem to mind and found ways to occupy herself while I was away. Our marriage was good, and our intimate life was fine. Besides my demanding work schedule, everything seemed okay in my life. We socialized occasionally, mostly at office functions, but sometimes with friends in the neighborhood. The girls were both fairly independent and only relied on us for tuition and some spending money. They both worked while on campus. Michelle and I met, began dating, and marriage followed naturally. There was no whirlwind romance or storybook episodes, just a straightforward progression that might seem dull to some. While I was of average appearance, Michelle was quite attractive. I stood tall, a full head taller than Michelle, and she often wore heels to even things out when we went out together. Her dark brown hair was starting to show a few gray streaks, giving her a sophisticated look. She jogged about 3 times a week to maintain her weight, and she was undeniably a fine-looking woman whom any man would be proud to have by his side. I'll call you once I'm settled in and give you the room number. We'll likely be busy most of the afternoon and evening. They have some late scheduled activities. If it goes on too long, I won't call tonight, I told Michelle. Don't worry, Ryan. I have plenty to keep me occupied. The girls dropped off some laundry this weekend, and the new book club edition arrived yesterday. Don't fret about me. I'll see you on Friday evening, Michelle reassured me. After a quick kiss, I headed off to Baltimore, taking the back roads for the 3-hour drive. I despise the interstate. With the meeting starting after lunch, I had ample time to settle in. I called Michelle to let her know I had arrived safely. The frustrating part was that there was nothing new being presented. I had read the agenda beforehand, yet I still expected more. I couldn't understand why they had sent me to a conference that felt redundant. I was thoroughly irritated after the last session of the afternoon when they announced that we were all going out for a special celebration dinner at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Despite there being 2 locations in Baltimore, they decided to take us to the one in Philly, where we had a corporate account. As we arrived in Philadelphia, the rain poured down. They had arranged 2 special tables for our group in a private meeting room. Given the prices they charge, I'm sure they didn't want a rowdy bunch disturbing the paying customers. After we all placed our orders, I excused myself to visit the men's room. The lighting in the restaurant was dim, but I could still spot my wife, Michelle, sitting in a secluded table with Patrick Roberts. She was impeccably dressed, as if she had gone to the salon. Michelle only does that for special occasions, maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Then it hit me. Tonight was special because it was our wedding anniversary. As I stood across the room, everything became much clearer. Now I understood why I was constantly on overnight business trips and attending seminars. I had no idea Michelle was so close to Patrick Roberts, especially considering he was married. We had never socialized with Patrick and his wife, and I didn't even know when or how they managed to start a relationship. At this point, it didn't matter anymore. It seemed like our trip to Europe would never happen. The restaurant exuded elegance, and I was keen not to disturb anyone's meal, so I opted for discretion. I made my way to the corner of the room near the restroom hallway, affording me a view of both Michelle and the conference room. I had assumed Michelle would silence her cell phone given the circumstances, but she didn't. "Hi, honey, it's Ryan." I tried the house phone, but got no answer. Michelle attempted to use her cell phone discreetly, a challenging task in such a busy and upscale dining spot. "Sorry, Ryan. I'm in the basement and missed the call. I thought you weren't going to ring. What's up?" Patrick's expression turned sour as Michelle attempted to keep her voice down. "Just wanted to let you know I'm on my way home. The conference ended early. I should be there in about an hour. See you soon." "What? Hold on a minute, Ryan. The washer is acting up." Michelle quickly covered the phone with her hand, conversing with Patrick urgently. Her facial expressions and hand gestures betrayed the urgency of the situation. Patrick swiftly dialed a number on his phone, his actions lightning fast. Meanwhile, across the room, the conference director answered his own cell phone. Patrick's conversation with the person on the other end of the line was brief. Fear flashed across Michelle's face as Patrick relayed what he just heard. Slowly, she brought the phone back to her mouth. "Ryan, where are you?" "I think you know the answer to that. You look lovely in that black dress. It complements the pearls I got you last Christmas. Don't bother coming back home tonight. I'll be moving out tomorrow. Oh, and happy anniversary." "Ryan, please, we need to talk." That phrase, they always say that. It's probably the dumbest thing a woman caught cheating can say, but they always say it. The rain was pouring down as I left the restaurant. My car was in Baltimore, leaving me stranded in Philly. I began walking towards downtown, and within minutes, I was drenched. Yet somehow, I didn't mind. My phone rang incessantly, but I ignored it. Eventually, I switched it off to conserve battery. Missing out on the free Ruth's Chris steak dinner felt like a loss, until I stumbled upon a cheese steak shop. I was feeling low, but that cheese steak sandwich was the best I'd ever tasted. Renting a car and heading home would have been the easy option, but I didn't really want to go home. Home was comfortable with all my belongings, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't convince myself it was necessary to go there. From the steak shop, it was just a short walk to the nearest bar. After 6 drafts, I was ready for bed. I woke up in a seedy motel room, likely rented by the hour. My suit was ruined from the previous night's weather. 3 blocks away was the bus station. I bought a razor and shaving cream from a vending machine, and a few minutes later, I looked somewhat presentable. A pair of chinos and a polo shirt set me back less than $20 at a nearby store. I donated my suit and white shirt to Goodwill. By that time, the banks were open. Although I don't reside in Philadelphia, most of the banks and companies I deal with have their offices or headquarters there. I swiftly closed my checking and savings accounts, even withdrawing the funds from my daughter's college fund. When I informed the mortgage department of my decision to relinquish my home loan, they were taken aback. They couldn't understand why. Given I had over $60,000 in equity, there was no need for foreclosure. Nevertheless, they eventually conceded it was a good deal for them and allowed me to sign the release forms, though they insisted on my wife's signature as well. With a smirk, I informed them that was their problem. I also canceled my bank credit card after settling the balance. Fortunately, I had accumulated a substantial sum in my whole life insurance policies. The company agreed to send the checks to my sister in Savannah. Fidelity Mutual Funds also agreed to mail the checks for my closed account. My cell phone battery died, but a friendly secretary lent me her phone to call work. My department head at work was displeased with my sudden departure. Despite his counteroffers to retain me failing, he politely pressed for the reason behind my abrupt decision. He wasn't thrilled to hear that Patrick Roberts had been keeping me occupied to pursue my wife. I explained that it was a done deal and beyond fixing. Before transferring me to the personnel office, he assured me that Roberts would face consequences. Personnel readily agreed to send my final checks for pay, profit sharing, sick leave, and accrued vacation pay to my sister's address. A sympathetic secretary even provided me with Patrick Roberts' home phone number. I made 2 additional phone calls to cancel 2 more credit cards. An hour later, I boarded the bus to Baltimore. My plan was to retrieve my car and gather the few belongings I had left in the hotel room. The journey from Baltimore to Savannah would take a full day. My sister, Christina, and I were close, so I decided to confide in her and inform her about some checks that were coming to her house. I turned on my cell phone to charge it in the car, ignoring the several calls that came in during that time. Once settled, I resolved to get a new number. With many hours on the road, there was ample time for reflection. I couldn't fathom what motivated Michelle to leave with Patrick Roberts. I questioned if I had played a role in it, or if I was merely a bystander. It seemed I had fallen short as a husband in some way. However, after some contemplation, I realized I no longer felt the need to assign blame. It was time to let go and move forward. I regretted not having my birth certificate, passport, and car title with me. I would have to manage without them or find a way to retrieve them. Fortunately, I had my laptop and briefcase. As for the cell phone charger, I could make do, as I wouldn't be using it much anyway. My medical insurance was still valid for 90 days, but I wasn't anticipating any health issues. About an hour outside Baltimore, I phoned Patrick Roberts' wife. Patrick had been let go that morning for reasons he claimed were unspecified. She thanked me for providing a bit more detail and found retribution for both her and me. I felt he deserved at least that much. Then I called Christina to let her know I was on my way. "Welcome, my wandering brother," Christina greeted me from the front porch as I arrived. "Your wife called twice, trying to track you down, but wouldn't divulge why it was urgent or why you might be visiting your sister. I suppose you'll enlighten me now, or I'll have to kick your butt." The porch boasted 4 rocking chairs and an ice chest, likely stocked with beer. Christina, being older and perhaps wiser, took a seat and gestured for me to join her. "Judging by your expression, I'm guessing this was something you didn't anticipate," she said. "I never saw it coming and certainly never expected it. Your little brother got hit out of nowhere and could use some comforting words," I replied, accepting a cold beer and a sympathetic smile from Christina. The rockers were strategically placed for us to prop our feet up on the porch railing and watch the passing traffic. Christina and her husband, Gary, had bought the old 2-story brick house 20 years ago. Fortunately, Gary was handy, as he had to replace a lot of the lower structure's wood. Termites wreak havoc in damp coastal areas. Their investment had paid off, as the house was now part of the Savannah Historical District. I suspect infidelity. Am I correct? Yep. And who's the cheating one, Michelle or Ryan? Well, I'm too socially inept to even meet another woman, so it must have been her. Christina pondered for a moment. I wasn't trying to be clever, but it was hard to outright say my wife cheated on me. Well, Ryan, that's unexpected. I never thought Michelle would do something like that. How did it happen? Don't know, don't care. It seems she got involved with my boss, and he started sending me out of town on business trips so they could be together. It was just luck that I found out. I had no clue. I didn't confront her. I just left. Is there a chance you're mistaken? No, she lied to my face about it while it was happening. She told me on the phone she was home doing laundry, but she was sitting in a restaurant with him, 30 feet away from me. There was no doubt. Of course, I never caught them in the act, but I'm pretty sure it happened at some point. Is there any chance of reconciliation? It's never going to happen. We opened another bottle and sat in silence for about 10 minutes. It was the first time I acknowledged what had happened, and it didn't feel good. Why don't you freshen up for dinner? Gary will be home in a couple of minutes. You two can catch up while I get some shrimp boiled. He doesn't know anything, so it's up to you if you want to tell him. I won't say anything if you prefer. Just tell him, Christina. It's better not to sweep something like this under the rug. I spent 2 days with Christina and Gary. They had two sons who were both married and living on their own. Gary had gained a few pounds, so he had plenty of extra clothes he wanted to give away. I gladly accepted them, as I needed some. Christina agreed to hold on to any checks or other mail that arrived for me until I could provide a forwarding address. I didn't know where I was headed next. Michelle called once the next day, but Christina told her she hadn't seen me. I asked Christina to call my daughters at college after I left and explain the situation as best she could. It was important to me that they knew their tuition would be taken care of. I wasn't ready to face that myself. Before leaving town, I got a new cell phone number and bought 2 pairs of comfortable shoes. I avoided the interstate and took Old Route 301 South instead. The best part about being in the area was being able to have Crystal for lunch and Waffle House for breakfast. What more could a man want? I slept in the car the first night, parked between 2 enormous RVs in a Walmart parking lot. One of the nice things about Crystal, besides the sliders, is the free Wi-Fi. I didn't really have a pressing need for the internet, but it was comforting to know it was there if I did. As I drove along the Street Ryans River, somewhere near Palatka, a stroke of luck changed my day for the better. It was mid-morning when I pulled into a small gas station, dock, and restaurant combo for a refuel. The place was a bit rundown, situated about 100 yards off the main road, but visible from the bridge crossing the river. Its gravel parking lot and weathered dock, which seemed to have once been a bustling marina, spoke of its history. The 2-story restaurant, half on the dock and half on land, hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint in at least a decade. Across the street stood 3 aging mobile homes, matching the worn-out appearance of the restaurant. The gas station seemed tailored for boaters cruising the waterway, as indicated by the sign out front, Sadie's Catfish House. Memories of my high school days working at Captain D's flooded back, giving me a nostalgic twinge. Carefully navigating my way down towards the river, I couldn't help but notice the place was in need of some TLC. 2 teenage boys sat quietly on the dock, simply gazing out at the water. Meanwhile, loud voices emanated from the back of the restaurant, 1 male and 1 female. It seemed the boys were seeking refuge from whatever was unfolding inside. "Sounded like there's quite a commotion in there," I remarked, attempting to strike a polite conversation without intruding. Both boys looked up at me, the older one flashing a small smile. "Edward showed up to work drunk again," he explained. "Mom's thinking of firing him, but he's the only cook she can find. If he's out, she'll have to close up shop. She can't handle cooking and waiting tables at the same time. I assume you guys lend a hand around here. The restaurant sells beer, so Larry and I can't work in the dining room until we're 18, according to state law. We can pitch in the kitchen, but that doesn't really help Mom out much." Just then, Edward stumbled out the back door of the kitchen. It was clear from his failed attempts to get up that he was drunk. "And don't even think about coming back, you bastard." That marked my first encounter with Megan Fields, a Cajun woman adrift in Florida. She stood at the kitchen door, fury blazing in her eyes. It was fortunate for Edward that she didn't have anything in her hands, otherwise she might have hurled it at him. Megan was nearly 6 feet tall, all muscle. Her uniform did nothing to flatter her, and it was apparent she was not well endowed. I don't typically notice a woman's chest, but the absence was striking in this case. I scolded myself for being so tactless and tried to push the immature thought aside. She had shoulder-length auburn hair and sharp cheekbones that accentuated her dark brown eyes. The lack of makeup added to her less than feminine appearance. She was a tough woman who clearly had a hard life. She stood with her hands on her hips as Edward stumbled away across the parking lot. "What the hell are you looking at?" She sounded as angry with me as she had been with Edward. "My name is Ryan Turner. I was looking for a job." I don't know what possessed me to say that. I wasn't actually looking for a job, but it seemed like the best thing to say at the time. Something about the whole exchange set off a fit of giggles in the 2 boys. "Larry, Charles, get yourselves inside and start getting ready for lunch. There's nothing funny about this, and I don't appreciate your attitude," barked the stern voice of the woman I'd come to know as Megan, the Wicked Witch of the South, as the boys hurried indoors. Turning her attention back to me, she asked, "My name is Megan. Do you have any restaurant experience?" I have 2 years under my belt at Capt D's, mostly in food prep and cooking. I'm not a master chef, but I can handle myself in a kitchen, I replied, inexplicably drawn into this game despite knowing it would wear thin soon. Yet her intensity fascinated me, holding my attention like a moth to a flame. My first day as a cook at Sadie's Catfish House went fairly smoothly. I made a few mistakes with orders, but nothing disastrous. The boys proved to be helpful, guiding me through standard procedures and locating supplies. It was mostly a routine of breading and frying. While I was more accustomed to batter-fried fish, the process was similar enough. The real hassle was cleaning the fryers after the lunch rush. I doubted they'd been cleaned in a year. Despite having a relatively simple oil filter system, it was still messy work. Megan and I spent the afternoon prepping for dinner service. She gave me a crash course in making coleslaw her way and went over the menu to address any questions I might have. Catfish dominated the menu. Though it hadn't been discussed explicitly, I got the sense she assumed I was here to stay. Flattered and intrigued, I found myself with plenty of time to spare and enjoyed the challenge. After we finished cleaning up in the evening, Megan handed me a cold long neck and we sat down to talk. If I forget, I want to thank you for helping me out today. I really appreciated your assistance. No problem. For $20 an hour, I'm game for just about anything. Whoa, hold up. Where did the $20 figure come from? Just trying to gauge how grateful you are. Edward gets $6 an hour. I don't have to, and I can't afford to pay that minimum wage. I can bump it up a little, but don't get too greedy. 6 is fine, Mrs. Fields. My big issue is a place to stay. The boys and I live in one of the trailers across the street. Nicole, the owner, lives in the big one. I rent the restaurant from her. Her son Mark runs the gas station and lives in the third trailer. There's a storage room upstairs, but it's bare. You can use the restaurant's toilet, and I can let you shower in the trailer. And how much for these luxurious accommodations? How about free overtime? I pay you for 40 hours a week, and anything over that you do for free. Are you open every day? I close Mondays. It's my day at the beauty spa. I found her humor suited her personality. How could I not like this woman? The first night in the storage room was rough. It was dusty, dirty, and the floor was hard. But it was better than sleeping in the Subaru. The nice thing was that I had a full kitchen to cook breakfast. After a week, I had settled in quite comfortably. I rang up Christina and gave her the address. She had a handful of mail to send down, hopefully containing some checks. On the first Monday, I headed into Palatka and set up a bank account along with a safety deposit box. It was a relief to finally unload all that cash I'd been carrying around. I took the boys with me and picked up some second-hand furniture. They enjoyed lending a hand, and I cherished their company. Showering in Megan's trailer felt awkward to me. I felt like I was imposing on her. So with some PVC pipe and a bit of time, I rigged up an outdoor shower behind the restaurant. It resembled a cabana setup and worked out well, as long as the weather wasn't too chilly. The boys pitched in with setting it up and even tested it out first. Megan's husband had been killed on an offshore drilling rig 8 years ago during a hurricane. She received some insurance money from the incident and used it to start the restaurant. Nicole and she got along fairly well. Larry and Charles spent a lot of time with me, perhaps seeking a father figure. My relationship with their mother remained strictly professional. There were moments when I thought of her differently, but I didn't want to risk jeopardizing a good thing. It was time to touch base with my daughters. Luckily, they were both at Penn State, so I only needed to make one call. From Ashley's voice, I could tell she was the one who answered the phone. "Hey, it's Dad. Just wanted to catch up with you guys. Is Haley around?" "Haley's in class. We were waiting for your call. Mom's been acting weird. Haley and I need to hear your side. What's going on?" "Sorry about the confusion, kiddo. So, what's Mom's explanation?" "She said she set up a romantic anniversary dinner for you both at a steakhouse. Your boss helped out, but when you got there, you saw them together and freaked. Mom didn't get a chance to explain. She seemed really upset." "Well, Ashley, that's quite the tale. But it's just that, a tale. Your mom didn't know I'd be there. She was shocked when I showed up. I called her from inside the restaurant before she even knew I was there. She told me she was at home doing laundry. When she saw me, she panicked. It wasn't a surprise party. My boss and your mom planned for me to be out of town so they could meet up. Caught her red-handed, and now she's scrambling to cover it up. That sounds more believable. What do you want us to do? And why are you calling from Savannah? I'm not actually in Savannah, just got the phone there. Try not to be too hard on your mom, but see if you can get her to come clean. Got it. Anything else? If you're going home for Thanksgiving, go into the den and grab my passport, birth certificate, and the Subaru title. Mail them to Aunt Christina's. She'll get them to me. And whatever you do, don't give Mom my cell number. I don't want to have to change it again. Apologies for everything, Dad. Haley and I are here to support you if you need anything. Thanks. Oh, and by the way, I've got all your tuition money, so no need to worry about that. I felt relieved knowing that was taken care of, although I dreaded having to break the news to Ashley about her mother. I was sure Ashley believed what I told her. Michelle's explanation was interesting, given the circumstances, but it wouldn't hold up. I was curious about the affair, but the pain it would cause wasn't worth it. Things were going smoothly at the Catfish house. I received the checks from Christina and the documents the girls sent down. I'd soon get new Florida car tags when the PA ones expired. I deposited my restaurant paychecks into my bank account, but the rest of the money stayed in the safety deposit box. With the low interest rates, it felt safer there, and I didn't feel like I was missing out on much. I ate at work all week, so Mondays were my chance for something different. The boys were always up for it, and Megan naturally joined us. It was my treat, and though neither of us admitted it, it felt like a sort of date. Chinese buffets were the favorite, but sushi was growing on us too. Sometimes we ended up driving quite a bit, but I didn't mind. Megan had mellowed out significantly. I hadn't seen her nasty side since that first day. Sometimes I caught her looking at me while we worked, but she quickly looked away. I was still married, but Megan was starting to catch my eye. The restaurant maintained a steady flow of customers, but its earnings barely covered expenses. I lived on a shoestring budget. Megan's payment went straight to the bank, leaving me with minimal living costs. I only splurged on a tank of gas each month and our Monday night outings with what had become my surrogate family, Larry, Charles, and Megan. I'm not sure how or when they became family to me, it just seemed to happen naturally. Nicole, on the other hand, had her lunch at Sadie's every day, courtesy of Megan. You could see she was growing weary of the menu. Despite being just an employee, I kept my observations to myself, silently noting the preferences of our mainly local clientele, who seemed more interested in the beer than the catfish. Just before Christmas, Haley called. "Dad, how are things going?" "All right, I guess. No complaints. Is it tuition time again?" "Next month. I just wanted to check in and make sure you're okayed for the holidays." "I'm good. You and Ashley will be with your mother, I assume." "Yeah, but we're not exactly looking forward to it, especially now that we know the whole story." "Would you mind filling me in?" "You're not going to like it, but you were right about everything. Mom and Mr. Roberts were seeing each other for over a year. Eventually, she admitted it was a fulfilling relationship. She doesn't want a divorce, but she also doesn't want to end things with him. She said she was hoping to keep everything the way it was because it was perfect for her. She started telling us details, and Ashley, and I had to ask her to stop. Ashley is barely speaking to Mom anymore." "You're correct. I didn't want to hear that. What's her relationship with Roberts like now?" "Oh, there isn't one. He got fired from his job and blamed her. His wife filed for divorce, and he blamed Mom for that too. Last I heard, he moved to Chicago and didn't ask Mom to go with him. Mom got a job at an insurance company answering phones. She ran out of money very quickly after you left and couldn't even pay the utility bills. She's just scraping by now, but I think she's selling off her jewelry and stuff. The bank told her she didn't have to make the house payments anymore if she signed a release. I think she's going to try and sell it instead. I'll send you a power of attorney form so that your mother can sell the house more easily. You can give it to her when you go home for Christmas. She'll probably appreciate that. She was wondering why you hadn't filed for divorce yet. I'm not going to. When she's ready, she'll have to do it. I have no money, no job, and I'm living off what I took from the bank when I left. It'll run out very soon. I saw no reason to let my daughters or my wife know that I had a nice stash in a Palatka bank waiting for my day of freedom. My wife had never shown an interest in our finances, and unless she got a really good lawyer, she'd never know. I figured she'd go for the cheapest lawyer she could find. I'll inform her when we head downstairs. Haley, I apologize for not getting you and the girls anything for the holidays this year. I'll make it up to you, I promise. After the first of the year, just let us know where you are, and we can come visit you during spring break. You can make it up to us then. It's a deal. Have a wonderful Christmas. For the past month or so, I've been using Megan's shower. She always managed to find something else to do while I was there, so there was no chance for anything improper. Northern Florida gets cold, so I had to rely on her facilities for a couple of months. I had reached the point where I wouldn't mind a bit of inappropriate behavior on her part, but I wasn't smooth enough to orchestrate such a thing. I was afraid that if I did something wrong, it would upset her. Typically, when I showered, the boys were at school. Feeling guilty for not getting my daughters anything for Christmas, I felt even worse when I got the boys new Game Boys and Megan a turquoise concho belt. She always wore her blouses out, and I couldn't help but imagine how good she would look with the right accessories. We closed the Catfish house early on Christmas Eve and exchanged gifts. Megan and the boys got me a GPS for the Subaru. We indulged in boiled shrimp and whole crawdads. It was enjoyable for a while, but the boys wanted to play with their new toys. Megan told them to go home and not wait up. Charles winked and gave me a thumbs up as they left. It looked like it was going to be a good holiday. Megan and I chatted for about an hour. We avoided any mention of our previous spouses. Even though I was still married, Megan didn't seem to mind. Since I was painfully slow on the uptake, she finally took my hand and led me upstairs. Both of us had months of pent-up frustration about to explode. It became a race to shed our clothes. Megan had the physique of a female weightlifter, with well-defined abs reminiscent of those seen on Bowflex commercials. Instead of soft breasts, she had firm, wonderful globes that showed no hint of sag despite having 2 kids. My fascination with her lack of ample chest adornment was unfounded. She was truly beautiful. We spent a wonderful night together, enjoying each other's company and getting to know one another. Afterward, we cuddled under the blanket for a few minutes, and she looked up and said, "Merry Christmas, Ryan Turner." Hearing the boys downstairs, Megan jumped out of bed and began to dress. By the time I made it downstairs, the boys were already eating breakfast. Charles gave me a big grin and another thumbs up, while Larry seemed oblivious to what was going on. I ate with the boys while their mom went home to take a shower. At that moment, a terrible thought crossed my mind about birth control. After that night, spending time with Megan became a regular occurrence. She didn't usually stay overnight, but it was nice when she did. I think Charles explained the facts of life to Larry shortly after the holidays, and both boys seemed okay with the arrangement. After the new year, Christina forwarded divorce papers. Michelle included a small note thanking me for the power of attorney and informing me that she had an offer on the house. The divorce proceedings were simple and straightforward. I was responsible for the girls' school tuition, and that was about it. I signed the papers and mailed them back to Michelle's lawyer. I realized I had revealed my location, but I no longer cared. Megan approached me about revamping the restaurant menu, giving me free rein to make changes as I saw fit. Though I was initially hesitant to take on such a task, I appreciated her confidence in me. Our seafood wholesaler was more than willing to include frozen whitefish portions in our weekly catfish delivery. Charles was enthusiastic about learning to make fish and chips, albeit the American version of the British classic. Megan and I managed everything during the school year, handling the slow but steady business with ease. However, we hadn't anticipated the consequences of increased business. On weekends, I persuaded the boys to help with painting. My standards weren't too high, so I was content with whatever they accomplished. While the entire business was Megan's, I sensed she wanted me to take on a greater role in its operation. Initially, I only made suggestions, but over time she seemed relieved when I took charge of decisions without consulting her. She never criticized or complained about my choices. Running a business like this wasn't my initial plan, but it felt like it was becoming my destiny. I hope that doesn't sound too profound. Mark caught the entrepreneurial bug and even spruced up the gas station. A call to his distributor resulted in shiny new signs and updated pumps that accepted credit cards. Once cleaned up, a salesman convinced him to install racks selling various tourist items, all at no cost to Mark, who received a cut of each sale. It elevated the station's appearance, making it seem less like a run-down establishment. Charles celebrated his 16th birthday by obtaining his learner's permit, and I thoroughly enjoyed teaching him how to drive our Outback. Megan seemed relieved that she didn't have to take on that task. In 2 years, it would be Larry's turn. One day, a good old boy from near Moss Bluff showed up with a pickup truck loaded with a freezer full of gator tail meat. He spent a good 30 minutes trying to convince me of the nutritional merits of eating reptiles. While he knew his subject matter well, he was a terrible salesman. I tried to show interest so as not to hurt his feelings. He also had some frozen cooter in the truck, and I got the sense he was feeling the pressure when he made a smart move. "I'll leave you 10 pounds of gator tail and 10 pounds of turtle for you to try out, free of charge. I'll be back in a week to see how things go. Would that be okay with you, mister?" He completely caught me off guard. I had been feeling confident, but he hit me with a zinger. "Sure, I'd be glad to give it a try. Any preparation suggestions?" "Most people just like to flatten it, bread it, and fry it." "If I decide I like it, how much is this going to cost me?" He reached into the truck and handed me a green sheet of paper with prices, phone numbers, and state permit numbers to sell the gator and the snapping turtle meat. Depending on the portions I served, it would be possible to make a nice profit with what he had if I could sell it. "Thank you, Mr. Allen. I'd be happy to give it a try. See you in a week." His name, phone number, and address adorned the top of the sheet. The fish and chips menu item was a hit. Initially only offered during evenings when Charles was on duty, it quickly became an all-day option. By the end of the week, the gator and cooter were sold out, prompting a call to Frank Allen for more. The most popular dish turned out to be a combo platter featuring gator, cooter, and catfish. Business was booming faster than expected. Megan and I usually handled the dishwashing after meals, but the increase in customers left us short on clean dishes. That's when we hired Hector. Hector didn't speak much English, but he was proficient at washing dishes and never complained. He rode his bicycle to the restaurant daily and worked both lunch and dinner shifts. We had no idea where he lived. When Frank Allen delivered the gator and cooter the following Saturday, he brought a young girl with him. Charles eagerly assisted in carrying the bags of frozen meat from the truck, barely taking his eyes off the girl, which led to a comical stumble. She appeared to be around Charles's age, maybe slightly older. Megan seemed amused by the scene, and at supper that night, we all enjoyed teasing him about it. February came to an unexpected close. I was just getting the fryer started when Megan returned to the kitchen. "Surprise, Ryan, you've got a visitor. Your wife's here," Megan announced, her tone utterly neutral. I couldn't discern any emotion from her, no happiness, sadness, or concern. With a resigned exhale, I stepped out into the dining area to see Michelle for the first time in months. She looked as stunning as ever, her hair and makeup flawless, her outfit highlighting her figure. Megan stayed behind in the kitchen. "Hi, Ryan. You're not easy to track down." "You're looking good," Michelle greeted me. "You too. I wasn't expecting to see you. Is there a specific reason for your visit?" I sensed her nervousness. She was chewing her lip and shifting her weight. "I just wanted to give you the final divorce decree. It went through faster than expected, and I thought you'd want it ASAP." She handed me a folded document, which I didn't bother opening. "The house has been sold and settled, so I brought a check for half of the proceeds. It's only $23,000. I didn't realize the realtor's commission would be so high." She passed me a cashier's check with my name on it. I took it and endorsed it. When I handed it back, she looked at me questioningly. "I don't need the money, Michelle. Keep it. It'll help you get started. Just curious, what are your plans?" "I've sold everything except my clothes. I'm on my way to stay with my sister in Dallas. She has a job lined up for me at the same place where she works. The girls have promised to come down and visit next summer. I hope everything works out for you. Do you have any questions or anything you want to discuss before I go? No, not really. I'm good. I don't need to know any more than I do now. In fact, just having you here is more than I can handle. Thanks for dropping off the papers. Excuse me now. I have to get back to work. The lunch crowd will be here soon. I turned and walked into the kitchen without looking back. I was trying not to be rude, but I didn't want to be with her any longer than I had to. Many people will say I was cold, but I don't care. There is nothing I could do to her that would make up for what she did to me. Megan was standing in the kitchen, looking out over the river. There was still no expression on her face. I walked to the end of the room and looked out over the parking lot. Michelle had just gotten into her car and was sitting in the driver's seat, crying. A minute later she was gone, and I would never see her again. I apologize, Megan. I had no idea she would turn up here. I'm not even sure how she found me. I understand it's not my place, but what did she want? She gave me my copy of the final divorce decree. She's free now. And you? I'm not so fortunate. I've managed to get myself tangled up again, this time with a captivating Cajun queen. I suppose I'm just a sucker for extraordinary women. I don't see a ring on your finger. How about tomorrow? Finally, I received a response. Megan had a wide grin as she wrapped her arms around my neck. After several minutes of passionate kissing, she pulled back and looked at me. Do you remember our Christmas Eve together? Of course. How could I ever forget? Well, congratulations, you're going to be a father. We got married the next day, and I moved out of the storeroom. The boys were just as thrilled as I was. Nicole's visits to the restaurant ceased, so Megan started bringing light meals or soup to her trailer after the rush. One day, Mark sat down with Megan and me, telling us it was time for Nicole to move to an assisted living facility. To afford it, she had to sell the marina complex, though it wasn't much of a marina anymore. Nicole was still sharp and clear-headed. I didn't discuss it with Megan, but I began negotiations with Nicole. It took most of my savings, but I bought the entire operation, including the trailers. The only condition was that Mark could continue running the gas station and boat slips. I'd pay him a salary and provide free lodging in his trailer, which worked out well for both of us since the station was profitable. I upgraded the kitchen with a dishwasher, which made Hector very happy. We also hired a waitress to assist Megan, hoping to have her trained by Megan's due date. The waitress, a single mom with 2 kids, was thrilled when we offered her the empty trailer at a fair rate. Epilogue. As the year progressed, the marina flourished beyond our expectations. Business boomed, and we introduced boat-run shrimp and peel-and-eat platters, catering to our female customers. By the end of summer, we had a dozen full-time boats in the new slips, with a waiting list for any available slots. Money wasn't an issue, just time. I felt content and happy. Charles found a steady relationship with Frank Allen's daughter, Tracy. He spent every chance he could on the outback. Larry started working with Mark and even asked his mom if he could take over the gas station when Mark retired. We hadn't realized Mark was considering retirement, and it seemed a couple of years away. Charles expressed his desire to stay with the restaurant. After a few days with their mother, Haley and Ashley came to spend the rest of the summer helping out. They found staying in the storeroom amusing and didn't mention their mother. Megan got along great with my daughters. They say the gender of a baby is determined by the father's genes. In September, Megan had a baby girl, whom we named Nicole. When our first wedding anniversary arrived, Megan asked where I wanted to go to celebrate. I replied, anywhere but a steakhouse. The third story. My name is Lester Anderson, and it's been a year since my world shattered into a million irreparable pieces. To say it simply blew up isn't entirely accurate. I played a significant role in its destruction. I orchestrated its downfall and then walked away amidst the chaos, with the assistance of about 60 accomplices who shared in the deceit. My wife, sadly, was among those collaborators, and there was a twisted satisfaction in seeing them all brought down alongside her. Before this seismic shift in my life, I was blissfully unaware. a content husband deeply in love with his wife, relishing in the joy of our shared existence. Our 5-year marriage seemed like a dream, a cozy home, cherished friends and neighbors, fulfilling careers, and supportive families. Financially secure, we were building a future together, but that future took an unexpected turn. I wish I could offer some rationale, a thread of logic to unravel the enigma of our relationship, but the truth eludes even me. She was my college sweetheart, kind, funny, and affectionate. She never displayed any inclination toward infidelity, never flirted with other men, nor dressed provocatively. I never once questioned her faithfulness. I'm employed in a research and engineering lab specializing in cutting-edge electronics for prestigious clients like NASA and the military. We affectionately refer to it as Geek Central. The interesting thing about us geeks is that while we thrive in the complexity of our professional lives, we keep things refreshingly simple at home. What you see is what you get. There's no elaborate facade because, frankly, we're not skilled in the art of deception. Some might view our demeanor as somewhat adolescent, and perhaps by conventional standards, it could be seen that way. We find joy in corny jokes, revel in quoting obscure movies and literature, and have a penchant for diving into intricate details. Despite any veneer of sophistication we may possess, we don't rank highly in the realm of social finesse. However, one thing we hold sacred is our commitment to honesty. In our world, honesty is not just a virtue, it's the cornerstone of our reputations and, consequently, our careers. Geeks don't lie. We understand that our credibility is paramount, both personally and professionally. My wife, Sandra, is employed in high finance at a firm called Wilson & Wilson, a major player in financing large-scale construction projects across the mid-Atlantic states. Despite their significant influence in the industry, I've noticed that many of Sandra's colleagues lack the academic pedigree I would expect. While they possess a solid grasp of financial matters, and some excel at spreadsheet programming, I often find myself feeling out of place when conversing with them, reminiscent of my high school days. A particular incident involving our decision to name our 2 kittens Oscar and Nat highlighted this divide. One of Sandra's coworkers suggested we should opt for names of more renowned figures, exemplifying the disparity in our perspectives. In their world, it seems status and conformity reign supreme, leaving me feeling like an outsider. Sandra and her colleagues are adept at navigating the intricate webs of finance, where every detail is meticulously documented, and personal ambition often takes precedence over individual integrity. The discomfort I initially felt among Sandra's coworkers escalated during the office Christmas party held at the nearby Marriott Hotel. Amidst the free-flowing alcohol and mingling crowds, distinguishing between employees and spouses became increasingly challenging. Overhearing a woman casually mention her work husband struck me as a stark reminder of the collective mindset prevalent in Sandra's professional circle, where alliances are formed for personal gain and loyalty is often fleeting. While I may not have harbored animosity toward them initially, events like these gradually eroded any semblance of goodwill I once held. It was an unsettling remark that caught me off guard. My initial instinct was to whirl around and identify the speaker, but a sudden urge to remain inconspicuous seized me. Stop, listen, don't react. Blend into the background, a voice in my head urged. We'll all have the next week off, but I suppose we'll manage without crossing the street, one of the women quipped, prompting laughter from both. You could always conjure up a minor account emergency, another chimed in, eliciting even heartier laughter. What did they mean by crossing the street? Were they insinuating they'd need to return to work during the Christmas party festivities? The cryptic conversation troubled me, stirring a sense of unease. Despite my discomfort, I reassured myself, I made the right choice in marrying Sandra. Whatever they're implying, it can't be good. With that, I pushed the unsettling thoughts aside and rejoined the revelry. For the next 3 weeks, the incident slipped from my mind. However, on a Friday evening, as I ascended the carpeted stairs from our basement, I overheard Sandra's voice from upstairs. "All right, I'll take care of it. What's a wife for, after all?" she chuckled. Wife. What's that supposed to mean? I wondered aloud, turning the corner just in time to see Sandra hanging up the phone. What was that all about? I inquired, striving to keep my tone free of accusation. She visibly startled as I approached. "Oh, that was Martin Harris. It's work-related. I need to head into the office tomorrow, and we'll have some late nights next week. There's an opportunity to assemble a funding package for a new apartment complex they're planning on J Street," Sandra explained. The memory of the cryptic conversation from the Christmas party resurfaced in my mind. "Sounds like a minor account emergency," I remarked. Sandra chuckled. "I wouldn't exactly call it an emergency, but it's an opportunity we can't afford to miss." I couldn't help but express my disappointment. We've both been putting in long hours this year. I was hoping we could take it easy this month and spend more time together. "Sweetie, please don't be upset. These opportunities don't come around often. You have to seize them while you can, or they slip away," Sandra reassured me. "I promise I'll make it up to you." Her mention of wife caught me off guard. What's with the wife talk? I thought you were my only wife. How many husbands do you have? I quipped, trying to inject a bit of humor into the conversation. A flicker of surprise flashed across Sandra's face as she realized I had overheard her. Attempting to mask it with a smile, she reassured me, "Just you silly. It's something we say at the office. We joke about seeing more of our work partners than our actual partners at home. It's just a little office humor. Everyone says it." Despite her attempt at reassurance, her trembling hands betrayed her underlying unease. "I'll just go in for a few hours tomorrow to kickstart things, and then we'll have the rest of the weekend together," she promised, her smile strained. The remainder of Friday night passed quietly, and Sandra left for the office on Saturday morning as if it were any other workday, albeit dressed casually. However, our promised weekend together didn't commence until after 7 p.m. Saturday night. Now, don't misunderstand me. I appreciate hard work and the importance of meeting deadlines. However, what troubled me was the sense of secrecy permeating our marriage. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was far more secrecy in our relationship than I had ever suspected. As I waited for Sandra to return home on that Saturday, my thoughts revolved around this newfound realization. Despite regularly sharing stories from my work and recounting anecdotes I'd heard, I suddenly became acutely aware that Sandra never divulged anything about her own job. It dawned on me that she had erected a substantial barrier between her work life and our home life, a divide I had never truly comprehended before. When my wife finally arrived home on Saturday night, she headed straight for the shower while I got started on grilling some steaks. Despite my attempts to focus on cooking, my mind remained fixated on that unsettling wife remark. Even if it was meant innocently, it rubbed me the wrong way, leaving me feeling irked. Two phrases from the Christmas party continued to replay in my mind like a broken record. One was "work husband," and the other was "crossing the street." I couldn't shake the nagging question of whether these phrases held literal or figurative meaning. Considering Sandra's office location, I couldn't help but ponder the possibilities. Across the street were two prominent buildings. The first, a sizable medical practice, and the other, the Marriott Hotel. It dawned on me that many individuals at the Christmas party seemed intimately familiar with the layout of the hotel, sparking a flurry of unsettling thoughts. While I tried to rationalize their frequent visits as business-related lunches or client accommodations, my sour mood led my imagination down darker paths. That week, feeling an overwhelming need for a break from the lab, I made a conscious decision to have my lunch in the solitude of my car. As fate would have it, my parking spot happened to be conveniently located just a block away from my wife's workplace, affording me a clear view of the street stretching between her office and the Marriott. What unfolded before me left a bitter taste in my mouth. Around 11:45 on Monday morning, just before the lunch hour, I observed several couples strolling across the street and disappearing into the Marriott. By 12:30, the same couples leisurely made their way back to their respective offices. Not a single group of 3 or 4, just pairs. While I didn't catch sight of my wife among them, my unease only intensified. The following day yielded a similar sight, different couples, but the same suspicious behavior. I entertained the idea of investigating further by observing the hotel lobby, but the risk of being recognized, particularly by Sandra, deterred me. In a move born out of desperation, I took a step I never imagined I would. That very afternoon, I enlisted the services of a private detective named Tristan Howard. I briefed him on what I had witnessed and outlined my desperate need for answers, providing him with a photograph of Sandra. His advice was as perplexing as it was disconcerting. Don't dwell on it. Resume your normal routine and trust that if there's something to be found, it will reveal itself soon enough. Though I voiced my hope that my suspicions were unfounded, I returned to work, grappling with a torrent of emotions. My investment in Tristan's services proved worthwhile. Thursday morning, he sat me down in his office and delivered the grim truth. On Wednesday morning, at precisely 11:45, my worst fears were confirmed. My wife entered the Marriott lobby with Martin Harris's arm draped around her waist. A fleeting stop at the reception desk secured them a key before they ascended to the 4th floor, not re-emerging until close to 12:40. Tristan, with his knack for gathering discreet information, had a private conversation with the desk clerk, shedding light on a disheartening truth. My wife and her alleged work husband were frequent guests at the hotel. This revelation came at a swift cost of $300, a mere down payment according to Tristan, who cautioned me that obtaining incontrovertible evidence would come at a higher price. Despite my internal turmoil and self-loathing for entertaining such suspicions, I resolved to pursue ironclad proof, even if it meant delving into the darkest corners of my thoughts. To achieve this, Tristan proposed a plan involving cooperation from the desk clerk and strategic room rentals. He would ascertain the room my wife and her colleague would occupy during their next visit, renting the adjacent rooms to install discreet video surveillance. It entailed additional expenses, a bribe included, but I was willing to pay whatever it took to uncover the truth. The past 7 days had been excruciatingly painful. I attempted to distance myself from Sandra as much as possible, yet she couldn't help but notice my erratic behavior. Brushing off her inquiries with vague mentions of work, I doubted she bought my flimsy excuses. Despite my efforts to maintain a facade of normalcy, my heartache was palpable. When Sandra expressed a desire for intimacy, I reluctantly obliged, convincing myself that if I hadn't discovered anything concrete yet, perhaps there was nothing to find. But as we made love, my heart was heavy with a mixture of anger and anguish. It felt like my marriage was unraveling before my eyes, and yet I lacked concrete evidence or a plausible explanation for my suspicions. Tristan's call from the clerk came as a bleak confirmation of my worst fears. He secured the room for the following Wednesday morning and evening, and I found myself sitting in his office on Thursday morning, clutching the evidence that shattered my world. Watching the gut-wrenching 40-minute video of my beloved wife, the very center of my universe, engaged in intimate acts with her supposed work husband Martin Harris, left me utterly devastated. In moments of turmoil, a geek's mind can wander down strange paths. I recalled an old joke about a husband discovering his wife's infidelity and threatening her lover with a gun, saying, "Don't laugh." "You're next," but I vowed to maintain a sense of order amidst the chaos. They would face the consequences of their betrayal, and I would find the strength to walk away. Before confronting the situation head-on, I knew I needed some time away. Being under the same roof as Sandra felt suffocating, unbearable, so I arranged to take the rest of the week off, citing a need to be down at Wall Ops for the weekend if anyone asked. With that sorted, I hastily packed a bag, left a note behind, and embarked on a journey westward. Thankfully, I had a childhood friend, Lucas, residing about an hour past Baltimore, who graciously offered to host me for the weekend. I breathed a sigh of relief, knowing I wouldn't risk encountering Sandra while at home. In my current state, I couldn't fathom feigning normalcy. It was all I could do to keep my emotions in check, to gather my thoughts, and devise a plan. Ironically, leaving that note was the first instance I ever lied to my wife, and it weighed heavily on my conscience. But in that moment, escape was imperative, and I wasn't ready to reveal my hand just yet. As I drove westward, I found myself grappling with profound questions about the woman I thought I knew so well. Had she mastered the art of compartmentalization to the extent that she could justify having two husbands? One thing became abundantly clear. My wife had mistaken trust for naivety. I had never been naive, and deceiving a husband who placed unwavering trust in her was hardly a feat. The days of blind trust were over, my marriage lay in ruins, awaiting its inevitable funeral. Childhood friends possess an uncanny ability to see through facades. They know you inside out, your past, your present, and your innermost thoughts. There's no hiding from them. Within minutes of my arrival at Lucas's place, he read the turmoil etched on my face. Sharing the devastating news, his reaction mirrored my own seething anger. But it was his wife, Tiffany, who urged us to temper our rage and approach the situation with clarity. She didn't defend Sandra. Rather, she implored me to reflect on my desires and avoid acting impulsively. A true understanding of the social dynamics at play often requires a woman's perspective. While my fury was directed at my wife and her alleged work husband, Tiffany's focus expanded to include the broader context of the workplace. In her eyes, it was the women who held the power over sexual dynamics, either actively participating or turning a blind eye. She quipped, "Men are pigs, and it's up to women to civilize them," sharing a knowing smile with her husband, who reluctantly concurred. "I want to bring them all down. I'm divorcing my wife, that deceitful, unfaithful woman. She's betrayed me, and it's clear this isn't her first offense. I want to inflict pain on every single one of them. I want to make Mr. Martin Harris regret ever being born with a shred of decency, and I want every adulterer in that office to rue the day they chose to betray their vows." Tiffany attempted to inject some rationality into my seething anger. Be absolutely certain you're prepared for the consequences. There might be factors at play that you're unaware of. Perhaps she'll be consumed by remorse and never repeat her actions. You love this woman enough to marry her. Do you truly want to throw it all away now? Think it through. Reluctantly, I produced the damning evidence, and together we watched the footage. Martin Harris, a mere pencil pusher, his domain was the realm of finances. While I dedicated myself to evening runs, he indulged in extravagant dining experiences. Martin Harris was anything but formidable. For 40 agonizing minutes, we bore witness to my wife surrendering herself to her supposed work husband. It was a soul-crushing experience. She wore a smile, even shared laughter, while I felt as though my world was crumbling around me. As the video concluded, a heavy silence settled over the room. I turned to Tiffany, seeking guidance. "How long should I ponder this?" I asked, desperate for clarity. She simply shook her head, enveloped me in a comforting embrace, and silently began preparing dinner. Lucas had pursued a career in law, an irony not lost on me. Yet he remained a loyal friend, and for that, I forgave him. His wife, a high school science teacher, possessed a surprisingly analytical mind. Over the course of the weekend, we engaged in countless discussions, and with their invaluable assistance, I began formulating a plan. Calling Tristan, I outlined my intentions. It would come at a cost, but with patience, it was feasible. We devised a strategy to divide my wife's office into two groups: management and those closely affiliated with Sandra, approximately 10 individuals, along with their respective work spouses. My goal wasn't merely to scorch them. I wanted to obliterate them. The remaining employees would feel the repercussions, albeit without draining my savings. Tristan would discreetly install cameras in the offices of management and the targeted coworkers, while the others would be captured on film entering and exiting through the lobby. When the time came to file for divorce, I would take legal action against the company, exposing the indiscretions of every employee's spouse. Throughout that weekend, I agonized over whether I had missed the warning signs. There must have been signs, I reasoned. She never appeared cold or indifferent. She was always supportive when I shared details about my work. Could she truly lead a double life without remorse? Was she perhaps a sociopath? Her jittery reaction when I confronted her about the wife remark on that fateful Friday suggested she was well aware of right and wrong, or at the very least, cognizant of potential consequences. I struggled to comprehend how anyone could sustain such duplicity without succumbing to a nervous breakdown. Somewhere amidst my contemplation, a troubling thought surfaced. By leaving town, I had unwittingly provided Sandra and her alleged paramour the ideal opportunity to use our home for their illicit rendezvous. Anger surged within me before I swiftly realized the futility of dwelling on it. In the grand scheme of things, their actions were inconsequential. I had already made up my mind to divorce her, irrespective of her current behavior. I resolved to leave her the bed, out of sheer practicality, and claim what was rightfully mine from the rest of the house. Steelier than ever, I braced myself for the forthcoming deception as I embarked on the drive home Sunday night. To save on expenses, we opted not to capture footage of the work spouses in their hotel rooms more than once, except for my wife and Mr. Harris. This minimized the number of room rentals and reduced the time required for Tristan's team. When it came to Sandra, I wanted to eliminate any possibility of her dismissing her actions as a one-time occurrence. In just 2 weeks, we achieved our objectives. Those weeks were excruciating. I loathed every moment. Some may question whether one instance was sufficient for retribution. While it certainly would have been, my desire for revenge extended beyond Sandra and Mr. Harris. I sought to expose the complicity of the entire office, the individuals who knew of my wife's infidelity yet remained silent. Uncovering their deceit required additional time. Most work spouses rendezvoused once a week, with some being more frequent visitors to the hotel across the street and others less so. While we didn't catch them all, we captured enough to serve our purpose. Sandra and her accomplice adhered to a strict every Wednesday schedule. To distance myself from the pain, I pretended to work late on numerous evenings. However, the ache of being home was unbearable. I concocted fictitious emergencies, supposedly requiring me to travel to Wallops on Thursdays, yet in reality, I spent those nights in a hotel near my workplace. On Friday nights, I sought solace in visiting Lucas and Tiffany once more, and on Monday nights, I returned to the hotel, seeking refuge from the torment of home. Sandra began to voice complaints about feeling neglected, and our relationship gradually turned icy. Little did she know the depth of that chill. Despite her efforts to maintain a facade of normalcy at home, I was emotionally distant, and it reflected in her demeanor. Seeking refuge, I relocated to the guest room for sleeping and made a point to leave the house early each morning. After all, I had my own set of deadlines at work. Perhaps Sandra sensed the strain in our marriage, or perhaps she bought into my flimsy excuses, or maybe she simply didn't care. Regardless, it didn't deter her from continuing her Wednesday lunches with her work husband. If anything, their lunch breaks only seemed to lengthen. It became evident that infidelity ran rampant in her workplace, with a significant portion of the staff, including many in senior positions, engaging in extramarital affairs. It was a case of the rots starting from the top, as the saying goes. Months later, upon reflection, I realized a glaring absence in the 3 videos I had viewed. Not once did they mention me. Neither he nor she spoke ill of me or felt the need to defend my honor. What stung even more was the sight of her wearing her wedding rings throughout those encounters, a silent testament to her indifference towards our marriage. It was as though I were invisible, non-existent in that aspect of her life. While there was a semblance of tenderness between the 2 lovers, it felt hollow, lacking the genuine intimacy one would expect from a committed relationship. They were more than mere casual partners, yet fell short of being true lovers. The moment I witnessed my wife and her work husband saunter through the lobby, his arm possessively around her waist, heading towards their rendezvous, I knew the marriage was beyond salvaging. Watching them engage in their tryst confirmed there would be no room for discussions, excuses, or worn-out cliches. I was resolved to obliterate not just our marriage, but also her entire workplace. I had no interest in hearing her apologies or witnessing her tears, and the mere notion of it being solely about sex was abhorrent. 4 encounters would shatter any delusions of her fidelity. My lawyer meticulously drafted the legal documents, while Tristan handled the rest. At precisely 10 o'clock on Monday morning, a process server strode into the offices of Wilson & Wilson, serving both Sandra and Martin Harris at their desks. With a deliberate stride, he proceeded to the CEO's office, where he served the company itself. It's almost ironic in hindsight. The CEO, Simon Wilson, was complicit in the very infidelity I sought to expose. At 67, he had a trophy wife scarcely half his age. What drove him to seek solace in the arms of a 45-year-old secretary remains a perplexing enigma to me. My phone incessantly buzzed at 10:20, but I silenced it without a second thought. Meanwhile, 5 of Tristan's operatives commenced distributing manila envelopes to the genuine spouses of every employee at the company. Some received photographs, others videos, accompanied by detailed reports they could utilize in divorce proceedings. Martin Harris' wife was given a particularly substantial envelope. For others, a letter served as a wake-up call, enlightening them about the unsavory activities unfolding at Wilson & Wilson, should they wish to confront their spouses upon returning home. Each envelope bore a brief note. In the spirit of transparency, you can thank Sandra Anderson for bringing this to our attention. I couldn't help but wonder how many allies my deceitful wife would have come Tuesday morning. Wilson & Wilson's demise was swift and profound. Following my lawsuit against the company, a deluge of 20 additional legal actions ensued. Divorces proliferated throughout the office like a raging inferno, consuming even marriages where evidence of infidelity was absent. Management's attempts to terminate employees tainted by the scandal only unveiled their own complicity in the debacle. Innocent individuals departed rapidly, seeking to salvage their tarnished reputations. The media seized upon the spectacle, and within 2 weeks, an article chronicling the firm's downfall prominently featured the term work spouses. I couldn't help but speculate about the source of that phrase. Perhaps it was coined by some clueless husband, ignorant of the realities of corporate culture. Business dwindled in the wake of the scandal, culminating in the closure of the office within 2 months. For nearly a year, the once bustling building stood eerily vacant. Eventually, I found myself seated across from Sandra in my lawyer's office. Tears streamed down her face as she attempted to convey remorse. After weeks of receiving a barrage of angry messages, punctuated by denials, pleas, and futile attempts at bribery and negotiation, she finally assumed a modicum of accountability for her actions. She attributed her transgressions to the allure and atmosphere of high finance. I struggled to comprehend the correlation between her infidelity and the financial sector, but evidently it was ingrained in the culture. However, her apology was short-lived. In a baffling turn of events, she attempted to shift blame onto me, asserting that my failure to communicate my concerns contributed to the situation. Ridiculous. You shouldn't need to remind your spouse to abstain from engaging in extramarital affairs, let alone cultivating a so-called work husband in the first place. Sandra's infidelity remained a perplexing enigma to me, as she never provided a satisfactory explanation. All I could discern was that she had undergone a profound transformation. The once bright-eyed and seemingly honest woman with a passion for business had morphed into a deceitful and duplicitous individual, seemingly guided by the mantra, "What he doesn't know won't hurt me." Tristan informed me that their liaisons only occurred on Wednesdays during their lunch breaks, and they hadn't seized the opportunity to meet during my absence from home that weekend. It was as if Sandra adhered to some twisted form of dual marriage, where cheating was constrained but not entirely eradicated. Tristan attempted to rationalize her behavior, suggesting it might be a perverse form of bonding ritual. Wilson & Wilson fostered a toxic corporate culture where team building was synonymous with intimate connections among coworkers. There seemed to be a distorted sense of loyalty at play, where employees confined their extramarital activities to a single individual, often their closest colleague. Tristan speculated that they perceived themselves as intellectually superior, sharing a clandestine knowledge or engaging in collective risk-taking. Whether it was a shared secret or a warped social contract, I struggled to comprehend. Despite my efforts to make sense of the situation, I couldn't shake my emotional investment in both my marriage to Sandra and the circumstances surrounding our divorce. I faced a choice: to spend a lifetime grappling with the complexities of these individuals or to simply walk away. Ultimately, I opted for the latter. My quest for revenge didn't unfold as I envisioned. While I emerged victorious in my legal battles, the company coffers were barren, and Martin Harris faced near-total devastation in his divorce proceedings. The irony wasn't lost on me. My own actions had precipitated the financial downfall of both the company and Harris, rendering them incapable of satisfying the legal judgments against them. My wife, stripped of her job, sought alimony upon our divorce, but my lawyer successfully argued that her unemployment was a direct consequence of her infidelity, and she was denied any financial support. Even the betrayed spouses, though wounded by their partner's betrayal, harbored resentment towards me for exposing the unpleasant truth, placing me squarely in their line of blame. It was an unforeseen consequence in a vast city where I could exist without their affection. However, one individual's reaction caught me off guard. Emma Harris approached me one evening at a bar, radiating an undeniable allure that captivated my attention. She introduced herself and took a seat beside me, her intentions palpable. "I'm divorcing my husband, but I want more than just revenge," she declared. "I want to confess to him that I slept with his mistress's husband. Will you assist me in this endeavor, Mr. Anderson? What do you say, Lester? Will you defile me and aid in humiliating the man who betrayed your wife?" After some contemplation, I acquiesced. As it turned out, it was a decision I didn't regret. Sandra's family initially directed their anger towards me, but I decided to confront the issue head-on by showing them the incriminating video. Witnessing her betrayal firsthand, they were overcome with emotion, offering apologies and shedding tears. Ultimately, they absolved me of blame for the divorce, although they attempted to persuade me to grant Sandra a second chance. However, forgiveness eluded me. I couldn't recall Sandra ever asking for it, and my heart remained hardened for over a year. Reflecting on the events during my divorce, I couldn't help but feel a sense of irony. Despite my expertise in high-tech electronics, it was rudimentary methods, a parked car, a bribe to the desk clerk, and off-the-shelf miniature cameras that exposed Sandra's infidelity. It was a stark reminder that even the most advanced technology couldn't prevent betrayal in matters of the heart. Reflecting on how effortlessly I stumbled upon their deceit, I couldn't shake the thought of how easily they could have concealed their affair. It dawned on me after overhearing a couple of conversations. From that point on, their indiscretions were glaringly obvious. Couples nonchalantly crossing the street displayed a brazenness that bordered on arrogance. It begged the question, did anyone care about appearances anymore? It seemed almost inconceivable that they had managed to evade detection for so long. It made me question whether the world I inhabited bore any resemblance to the reality around me. Were such affairs commonplace? In the realm where I worked, those who boasted of their romantic conquests were usually solitary figures, their only companion being their own hand. Once again, I found myself relegated to the sidelines, observing the antics of the cool kids from afar. Occasionally, I catch glimpses of Sandra in passing, whether on the streets or in stores. We never exchange words, and I remain oblivious to her current endeavors. When our eyes meet, I see a flicker of sorrow in hers, but I can't bear to hold her gaze for long. The mere sight of her still tugs at my heartstrings, a reminder of the life I once knew that now lies in ruins. I've turned a corner, embarking on a journey of starting anew. Like a detonator igniting an explosion, I set events in motion that tore apart not only our relationship, but also my own sense of self. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.